Everybody loves a road trip, right? Just the thought of the open road, wind in your hair, the freedom to stop when you want, to camp where you want, to sleep where you want. That's the fantasy, right? It's kind of like the American dream fantasy, the things that Route 66 were made of, right? What happens when that road trip turns into a nightmare? My name is Carolyn, and this is my RV life. Anybody who's been with me a while knows that I've done a few big road trips. Most recently, last year, I drove from Nevada to Portland, Maine and back, over 17,000 miles, solo, just me and my dog Sadie, working and living and traveling on the road. And many of you who stick with me through the thick and thin of it know that every day wasn't exactly that picturesque freedom that we all imagine road trips to be. I'm in Tennessee. I just stopped for my breakfast break, and my refrigerator door broke. Fell off. A lot of you saw me get stressed out. You saw me get cranky. You saw me get tired. And so today what I'm going to share with you are the do's and don'ts of a long road trip. Whether you're living in an RV, whether you're part-time in an RV and planning a big road trip, whether you are going to do a road trip on a motorcycle or a car, I'm going to share with you the valuable do's and don'ts that I have learned in over 6 years on the road and how to make a road trip a successful one, something that you enjoy, something that doesn't get too tiring. Okay, so stay tuned. I'm going to share all those do's and don'ts with you. I want to tell you about today's video sponsor, the Waggle Pet Monitor. No RV road trip or RV living with a furry BFF is complete without a Waggle Pet Monitor. This monitoring device, working with an app on your cell phone, tells you in real time what the temperature, humidity, and heat index is inside your RV or vehicle. Especially if you're on the road with your furry best friend, there are times you have to leave your pet inside the vehicle, whether it's to run in the grocery store or to run an errand or to go to a doctor's appointment. This device right here is going to give you the peace of mind you need to travel safely with your pet. So this device works on its own Verizon 4G LTE signal, which means you're going to have service to this device in almost every place across the country so that it can speak to the app on your phone. You don't have to have Verizon 4G. Don't worry about it. It works with whatever service you have on your phone. And today, I also want to tell you about Waggle Vet Chat. You can have a pet expert in your pocket 24/7 to instantly answer any questions you have about the health and safety of your pet. You can get consultations. You can get advice about diet and training and health if you have a health issue. I can't tell you how many times I've been on the road with my dogs and they're not acting right and I'm an hour away from a vet and I don't know what to do. So having Waggle Vet Chat can be an invaluable addition to your RV or van life. And now when you purchase a Waggle through the link in the video description below and enter Sadie 50 at checkout, not only are you going to get 50% off on your Waggle device, you're going to get the My Waggle vet service free until March 31st. So the sooner you jump on, the more free vet chat you're going to get. Are you ready for my 4 road trip do's and don'ts? These things are going to help you have a more successful road trip. Number 1, don't go without a plan. You guys know me, I am not a planner. I really like to take things as they go, let the wind in the road take me wherever it may and figure things out along the way. But that doesn't always work. Sometimes, depending on where you're traveling, and this year I traveled east of the Mississippi, which is much more challenging for traveling the way I like to travel than it is on the West Coast, or even my trip to Alaska wasn't as challenging. And if you know anything about boondocking and RV living, things are a little more challenging east of the Mississippi because there's less public land. You don't have the BLM land, Bureau of Land Management, the desert. You don't have as much national forest. And even when you have national forest, there's private property mixed in. So depending on the state, some of the states are really small, like Vermont, and really have a lot of people, so they're really impacted, and it just is a lot more challenging. So it's really important if you're going to be traveling, especially to an area like that, that's highly populated. There isn't as much public land if you're used to boondocking like I am. It's really important to have a plan. I'm not saying you have to account for every minute of every day or every mile that you're gonna travel, but I highly suggest at least having a rough sketch, a rough plan, a rough idea of where you wanna go. Maybe highlight a handful of places you want to go, things you want to see, and then start planning your camping along the way. Is there going to be good boondocking? And I've given you guys, I've done videos, I'll put at the end of this video, and in the video description, some suggested videos to help you with some of the things that I'm talking about. But the tools that I use, freecampsites.net, US public lands, free roam, you can use all of those to maybe even start plotting some of your camps along the way. So that's why it's really important, especially if you're traveling to the east, to have a plan, to at least have an idea of 4 or 5 places that you want to see, and start maybe planning ahead of time where you're gonna stay. And of course, also, depending on what your financial situation is, you're gonna also need to plan a budget. So all of that was something really important for me when I was planning my trip to Alaska. Alaska just seems bigger and scarier in some ways, you know, so I did do a lot more planning and budgeting and things like that for my trip to Alaska. But even if you are planning a trip to Maine like I did, your budget might be a consideration and something that you need to start planning for. Number 2, which kind of goes with number 1, don't plan on easy boondocking. If you don't know what boondocking is, it means dispersed camping is the technical term you'll see on most public lands websites. Dispersed camping is what you find on national forests, even wildlife management areas and BLM land. And I like to go remote. I like to do dispersed camping. I like to do boondocking, but you can't count on that in every state that you're traveling to, or country for that matter, if you are going to a different country. So it's really important to know that your boondocking options are going to be significantly smaller, more reduced than what you're used to if you are used to traveling west of the Mississippi. So you're going to need to plan for that. Does that mean you're going to be staying in more campgrounds? If so, you need to maybe make reservations ahead of time. One thing I ran into in some areas is that, especially with COVID, a lot of the state parks and things like that are requiring reservations. There's fewer walk-in sites. So that might be something you need to plan ahead for. Do I want to visit a national park in my travels along the way and I'm 6 months out or a year out? You might need to make reservations now. Things are filling up. Camping has gotten more popular with COVID. So if you're not going to be able to rely on boondocking, which takes so much time, energy, effort, patience. So there is good boondocking east of the Mississippi, but it's hard to find. It takes a lot more work than it does in the West. And if you are hell-bent on boondocking like I was, just count that into your process, count that into your hours spent traveling. So the nice thing about east of the Mississippi, there is a lot less boondocking, but when you can find it, it's awesome. You get solitude because not a lot of people do it, especially in the summer because it's hot and it's humid and there's bugs. So if you can put up with all that, you can find the solitude you want. But if you can't deal with that, if you don't have the time or the energy or the resources to spend an hour, maybe 2 hours every time you want to find a camp, then you're going to need to make other plans, and that might be looking for campgrounds or RV parks, and those might need to be reserved ahead of time. So even if you can't reserve them now, just know on your travels, even up to 2 weeks, 3 weeks, maybe a month in advance, you might need to start looking for reservations if you're going to be staying in a campground. Number 3, the biggest mistake I made. Even if you're doing a cross-country trip, I had a little bit of a time limit because I decided I wanted to be in New England for the fall. And that meant also I had a pretty quick turnaround in New England because I couldn't be there too long because I didn't want the weather to turn and get stuck up there in the snow and the freezing temps. So, I mean, if you're gonna do an indefinite road trip, you know, if kind of like RV life, right? You're in your RV life and you're just meandering around the country indefinitely, that's one thing. But if you do have some time constraints for whatever reason, whether it's seasonality or other personal commitments, then definitely you need to plan and not plan to do too much. Here's the mistake I made. I knew my ultimate goal was New England in the fall. But my goal also was kind of to see as much as I could and do as much boondocking and exploring along the way. I did Nevada, Wyoming, North Dakota, South Dakota, Minnesota, Michigan, Wisconsin, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, New York. I mean, I did everything, and I didn't just fly through all those states. I kind of did toward the end, Ohio and Pennsylvania. Here's what I would do differently. I would say, okay, my goal is New England, let's say late September. I'm going to choose 2 or 3 areas that I want to explore on the way instead of 7 states, because that put me in a situation where I was constantly looking for camps. I was traveling more than I like to travel. I don't normally like to drive more than a few hours a day, but I had days where I was driving 6, 7, 8 hours a day, maybe even more by the time I got to a spot and I was looking for boondocking. So yeah, if I had to do it different, this is what I would have done. I would have said, okay, New England by fall, and on the way, I want to do the Upper Peninsula. I want to maybe do Minnesota and New York. I would have chosen maybe 3 places, maybe even fewer than that in retrospect. And I would have just flown through all the other states, like, you know, stayed at Walmarts or whatever en route to those 3 areas. Does that make sense? Instead, what I did, it was like, okay, I'm going through Wyoming. I want to see all these great things in Wyoming. I'm going through Montana. No, I'm going through North Dakota. Let's do the Badlands. No, wherever, South Dakota. Let's do the Badlands. Let's do, what else? The National Forest. And okay, I'm going through North Dakota next. So let's do, and I just tried to do too much in every state. So again, I live in an RV. I can always go back. And next time, next time, I've pretty much already done everything. But what I would do differently is just chosen a few places and focused on those places. I could have spent 3 months in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, but I had to get moving. And that's what I should have done. I should have skipped Minnesota this time. I should have skipped the Dakotas this time and maybe just gone straight through to the Upper Peninsula, taken my time, explored that, and got, you know, maybe for a month, and then moved on to New York and explored New York for a month. That's the way I would recommend doing it instead of doing it the way I did. Again, if you're traveling indefinitely and you don't have any deadlines at all, then fine, go ahead and do that. But I still think it's better to, if you're doing a big cross-country road trip, like Alaska. When I went to Alaska, my goal was Alaska. I'm going to Alaska. I have 3 or 4 weeks to get there, but my goal is to spend as much time as possible in Alaska. So I got to see things along the way, but I saw things along the way. I had a route. I didn't go, okay, I'm going from here to here, like I did this time. I'm starting in the United States and going to Alaska, so I'm going to follow this route and find great boondocking along the way. What I did from Nevada to Maine, it was like, okay, Nevada to Maine, let's go here, let's go here, let's go here, let's go here. I 17,000 miles, you know, for a 3,000-mile trip. So that's a huge one. That's a huge one. Whether you're full-time or not, I think it's a really good idea to know that you don't have to do everything all at once. You can always go back and say, okay, I'm going to go back and do North Dakota. And I'll spend several weeks or a month or a whole summer exploring North Dakota. Does that make sense? There's a lot of information in that one. And finally, the biggest mistake I made is I didn't practice self-care. So no matter what you're doing, especially on a long road trip, no matter how much you think, oh, this is great, I'm free, I'm having fun, right, I'm having fun. Get out of that mentality and remember to practice self-care. Don't let the road sweep you up in this fantasy that you're having fun. Check in with yourself and say, okay, am I tired? To steal a saying from AA, am I hungry, angry, lonely, or tired? Halt. Hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. And if I am any of those things, what do I need to do to get back to myself? I was so hung up on must find good boondocking and then I will rest. Literally, that's what I kept doing for 7 states. For months. I'll rest when I find a good boondocking spot. No. I should have done my due diligence, maybe done some research, found a campground maybe that wasn't very crowded. A national forest campground would have been perfect, and just said, okay, you know what? I'm just gonna stay for a week. And interestingly, that's what I've done since I've been back in the West. I have stayed at some campgrounds. I'm like, you know what? I've got a lot going on. I just need to rest. The interesting thing about staying in a campground, the first day is a little rough because there's people and noise all around me, but I acclimate to it pretty quickly. And I'm like, yeah, okay, by day 3, this isn't so bad. I kind of like it. I kind of like having water that I don't have to ration, and all the electricity I need, and and it's even nice to see people around me and to talk to my neighbors and to meet viewers. So I kind of get set in my ways and forget how easily I can acclimate to whatever situation I'm in. But that's my final tip for you, to make sure you're practicing self-care. Check in with yourself. If you're not feeling right, if you're angry or you're stressed, check in with yourself and say, okay, I'm not taking care of myself. And you guys saw me do this a couple of times. What do I need to do to get right again? Do I need to go for a hike? Do I need to go for a jog? Do I need to go take a shower or find a hot spring? Or just meditate? Or maybe just lay in bed for a day? Yeah, that's a luxury I don't have with my dog. He's over there somewhere digging. You know, or maybe just watch guilty pleasure TV all day. Or maybe for me, making a healthy meal. Just stopping and taking the time to make a healthy meal, which is really hard sometimes for those of us who travel solo, who still work. There are so many demands on our time. Not only was I driving a bunch and taking care of my dog, but when I wasn't driving, I had to catch up on work. So there's a lot of things that are always going to demand our attention, pull our attention away from ourselves, but we got to take care of ourselves. And if we don't take care of ourselves, then we're not experiencing what we set out to experience. Does that make sense? Once we start getting so wrapped up in the doing the experience and doing it right, and forgetting to check in with ourselves and say, wait a minute, am I really enjoying this? You know, maybe at one point I should have just turned around and said, screw this, I'm tired, I don't want to do it anymore. That thought did cross my mind a couple of times. You know, why am I doing this? But I was so close to Maine. I'm like, I gotta get to Maine. Maybe I should have just turned around. So that's the final don't. Don't lose track of yourself. Don't lose yourself. Do check in. Do practice self-care. All right. I hope that my experience, as always, the good, the bad, the ugly, the mistakes that I make, my grouchy moments, my tired moments, I hope that all helps you, and I share it all. I don't just turn on, and I say this all the time, you know, if I just turned on the camera when I was happy and everything was going well, I wouldn't be showing you reality. And a lot of you are here for all that's real. So I hope that helps. What tips do you have? Leave them below. Tell me what your road trip tip is. Say road trip tip and leave it below for others to see. And let me know how you take care of yourself and how you make sure you have a fun and free and successful road trip, whether you're RVing or not. Thank you all so much. We reached 135,000 subscribers today, and I was stalled at 134 for a very long time. I think something happened to finally like jolt the YouTube algorithm. Come on, what are you doing? Wake up. So I want to thank everyone, whether you've been here since day one or whether you just got here 5 minutes ago. Thank you. I appreciate you. It takes every single one of you here who watches, who likes, who recommends, who gives me a thumbs up, who subscribes to my video to keep this channel alive. And that's a reminder. I've been hearing this so much. Even if you think you are subscribed to my channel, do me a favor and look right now to make sure you are. A lot of people, I can't believe how many people say YouTube unsubscribe them. So check your notifications, check your subscriptions, make sure you're still subscribed to my channel, and tune in on Sunday night for another travel video. I saved the best for last, the most gorgeous spot I stopped at in Arkansas. I'm gonna go back in time a little bit before we go forward. And I'm gonna show you waterfalls, some amazing, beautiful things in Arkansas, as well as some Native American ruins. So tune in for that, subscribe below if you haven't already, and I'll see you Sunday night. In the meantime, be happy, be free, and be kind. Mwah. I will see you soon.